As the greater West Bloomfield community continues to recover from the devastating attacks on Temple, Israel, praise is being brought upon our local law enforcement and first responders for their quick and effective actions during the attack. This extends to our local fire department as fire crews arrived within minutes of the crash to combat the blaze ignited by the suspect's vehicle ramming the hallway. Their rapid intervention prevented the fire from spreading to the Early Childhood Development Center. Joining us now on the Splash Live to tell us more from the fire department's perspective is Blake Belsky with the West Bloomfield Fire Department. Blake, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Jake. I appreciate you having me on.
Of course, obviously wish that this were under a lighter topic, but we do want to hear your perspective from this day in West Bloomfield. And Blake, the 911 call came in at about quarter after noon when your team arrived and saw the smoke billowing from the front entrance. What was the first priority for the fire and EMS units regarding the children that were still inside the building?
Well, luckily, our fire and EMS crews, they are familiar with the building. They're familiar with the folks who use that building day to day. And combined with the information that was available from our dispatchers at the time, we didn't even need to wait until we got on scene to start thinking about what our first actions were going to be. I'm sure our crews that were racing there were thinking about who's inside, how do we get them out safely, how do we shelter them in place, if that's going to be the most important thing. And then once they got on scene and obviously confirmed that there was in fact a fire in the building, they know it's time to get to work. And the biggest concern is how do we keep everyone safe with such a complicated incident with fire and the criminal activity that led to the fire starting in the first place.
I'd imagine it would be a lot of chaos dealing with a situation like this, especially with so many students, 104 students that were inside the building. What were the immediate safety risks that you had to mitigate in that situation?
Well, the first thing is to make sure that the kids and the staff, all the occupants of the building, make sure that they stay safe. In some cases, maybe it's going to be a shelter-in-place situation. Maybe the safest thing for them to do is to stay exactly where they are. And that could be different based on where they were located in the building. This is a decision that our crews have to make in real time with the information that they have available. And sometimes the information changes. Once we found out that the fire was, contained where it was, they've got a fantastic sprinkler system that contained that fire. The smoke was the biggest issue. But then it became an issue of once we know they're protected from the fire, how do we protect them from the attackers? However many there were, we didn't know at the time if there was one attack, 2, 3 people involved. We didn't know if there were explosive devices that were going to be deployed at some point. So it became an issue of how do we make sure that these people stay safe no matter where they are, and make sure we take action for that.
That's right. Obviously, there were a lot of unknowns at that situation, that information that we didn't know now, that we know now that we did not know at the time. So that obviously probably caused a bit more chaos and worry as you were navigating the situation. Now, dealing with 100 toddlers and preschoolers and keeping them calm, that's a tall order no matter the situation. As an EMS coordinator, how did you keep these toddlers in line and keeping them, and as you're moving them through an active, high-intensity crime scene?
I'd love to be able to take credit for keeping these kids calm, but all of that credit goes to the staff. We were very fortunate to have their teachers, their caregivers, and eventually their parents at the reunification center across the street. The folks who know the kids and the folks that the kids know and are comfortable around, they're the ones who were able to keep them calm. In spite of all of the feelings and emotions that they were experiencing, they were able to, set those aside, deal with them later, but not only keep the kids safe, but keep them relatively comfortable in a very strange situation. You can imagine any change in a routine for a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old is going to be a big event. Dragging them out of their classroom in a chaotic situation where there's obviously a fire, there's obviously something amiss, dragging them outside without their coats and taking them to an entirely new location and having to figure that out. The fire department, the police department, none of the responders can take credit for keeping these kids calm. All the credit goes to the staff of Temple Israel and the staff at Shenandoah Country Club for keeping them sheltered and fed the whole time.
That's right. It was a community effort all throughout Greater West Bloomfield, with Shenandoah and Temple Israel's team also coming to the aid of these kids. Now, talking about the staff at the Early Childhood Center, they had just completed active shooter training back in January. How did their discipline and lockdown procedures make your job easier as you move the kids to safety?
I mean, obviously, the first thing we noticed is that the kids were safe when we got there. That is a credit to the training that teachers went through, that they paid attention and were able to put those lessons to practice. I don't think any of us who have to go through active shooter training, whether it's as a responder or as just a member of the community, school teachers and people that work in offices, none of us ever go through that training and think, oh, this is something I'm going to need next week. Thank goodness that these teachers went through the training and learned from it. We had teachers who had their go bags full of supplies, evacuation instructions, first aid supplies in case that they needed it, in case someone got injured, leaving the building, let alone from the attack. And everyone was prepared, and it showed. They did a fantastic job. I can't say enough good things about them.
For those just joining us on the Splash Live, I'm talking with West Bloomfield Fire Department EMS Coordinator Blake Belsky, who's talking about the fire department's response to that harrowing attack on Temple Israel that took place recently. And Blake, what I remember from that day, there was a ton of police and fire units out on that site, roughly 80 units, to ensure the path from the building to the transport vehicles was secure. Can you describe that human shield or the perimeter that was established by these law enforcement officers?
Well, one thing about law enforcement, when they hear that something bad is happening, they don't even wait for an invitation. They start showing up in droves, and that was apparent to anyone who saw any of that footage or happened to be on scene. There were hundreds of police officers ready to help. And once we had the actual threat contained, the next thing became to make sure that students and staff were able to evacuate safely. And so we put those hundreds of officers on scene to work, making sure that those students were protected. Again, with these attacks, I use this term seriously, these terrorist incidents, we don't know until the incident is over if there's one attacker, two attackers, if there's going to be devices in the parking lot that are going to cause harm as evacuation occurs. So the priority becomes getting them to a safe environment and making sure they transport there safely. And part of that is putting the people with eyes who know what to look for and have some shield, some protective armor that they can move these kids safely. Put them in the way in between the kids and any potential harm. And we were lucky to have no shortage of officers on scene prepared to do that work.
That's right. It was great to have all of these officers on scene during this situation. Now, the decision was made to move the children to the Shenandoah Country Club for reunification. What were the logistics of that transport while Walnut Lake Road was effectively a parking lot for emergency vehicles?
Well, we had some luck as far as Shenandoah being in such close proximity to Temple Israel. The folks that had to come over there on foot, it didn't take a whole lot of time. We had some other folks that evacuated to a home in the neighborhood behind Temple Israel, as a matter of fact, and I believe they were picked up by a bus and brought over to Shenandoah, so that we had all of the evacuees in one spot for reunification. Moving any vehicles, buses, personal vehicles, even emergency vehicles, through a sea of hundreds of police cars and fire trucks and ambulances does become a bit of an issue. We had lots of folks that were ready to move cars as needed, whether it was the police officers moving their own vehicles. Some of those police officers were busy and couldn't give us their keys, so we did have tow trucks on site ready to just scoot cars out of the way as needed so we could clear a path for other arriving emergency vehicles, buses that are performing evacuations, and ultimately for the families to be able to leave and go home safely.
Wow, that is a lot to navigate for these kids and for anybody who was at Temple Israel and at that scene that day. Now, Blake, as a first responder, you're trained for the technical side of this, but what was the atmosphere like at the reunification site the moment those kids were finally handed back to their parents?
Oh, well, I'd love to say I have more experience and more training with family reunification, but this was my first time. I was asked by Chief Lowry to set up family reunification efforts at Shenandoah, and thank goodness Shenandoah. I mean, You want to talk about the hospitality business. They have gone above and beyond what anyone could have expected from them in this community. So proud of what they were willing to do and what they were able to do for us. We pretty much commandeered a ballroom for family reunification, and we made sure that it kind of became a de facto preschool again. We took attendance. We had classrooms kind of separated so that we could find people easily as parents came in. And we had, again, plenty of law enforcement to help us sign parents in, make sure nobody leaves with a kid that they aren't supposed to leave with and that we didn't know was leaving. Everyone was super cooperative. And again, we could not have done this without the help of Shenandoah and without the cooperation and the assistance from all of these staff and teachers at Temple Israel. It was as good as we could have hoped for.
I imagine so. Big team effort from everybody. Blake, we are running short on time. I got one more question before we wrap things up. Looking at the damage to the building and the intensity of that fire, how proud are you of the fact that every single student and staff member made it out without a single physical injury?
It's incredible. It's incredible. And again, I would love to, we would love to take credit for it, but this was absolutely a partnership. This was a huge credit to the training of our first responders, the training of everyone at Temple Israel, and the training and cooperation from the community. If we hadn't had folks keeping Walnut Lake clear and trying to get through the neighborhoods, we couldn't have done this as smoothly as it worked out. So thank you to everyone in the community for your support, your cooperation, and we hope we never have to do this again.
I couldn't agree more to that. And Blake, we thank you for the work that you, the fire department, and all of our first responders did in protecting West Bloomfield that day, navigating through the chaos, and keeping everybody safe. Thank you so much for joining us today here on The Splash Live.
Thank you, Jake. Have a great weekend.